Well, as the chaos trailing the cash scarcity assumes a worrisome dimension, Senior Manager, ZCAP Partners, Ajibola Tobi Osho, as well as the AVP of our ZCAP Partners, Oluwatosin Ayonfalu, joins me now via Zoom to do more and talk more around this. Thank you so much. It's your first time on the show. We appreciate you. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us here.
All right then, ladies first, like they always say. So Tosi, you allow me start with Ajibola. Now, let me start this way. What is your understanding of this policy? Many say a lot of positives around it, but the way we are going about it here, it seems like this is going to outshine whatever positive it carries.
Okay, thank you so much for having us once again. In terms of the policies per se, I don't think it's a bad policy personally. I think the question is, does the central bank have the right to implement or to carry out this policy? Yes, they do. They have the right to say they want to change the Naira notes. I mean, let's think about it. When was the Naira note changed, right? When was the last time there was a change on the Naira note? It's been a while. I think over a decade ago, right? So the question, and the next question is, for what reason? Why is the question, right? And they come up with the fact that there's inflation. They're trying to curb corruption, illicit use of cash by the bandits and the rest that we have seen over time. Are these reasons valid? Oh, yes, they are very valid. But the question that surrounds everybody is the implementation. So I don't think, in the real sense, anyone has a problem with the plan itself. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong in its policies. I think the only problem that we are seeing right now is the means at which these policies are being implemented. As in, effectively implemented, I don't think so. Would he have downside? Oh, yes, definitely it would. It would, given that we're even at a time where a whole lot of people are looking up at the government, expecting so much. There are a lot of expectants from the government, a lot of people expecting so much from election. It seems as if a lot of people are at the edge, right? There's a break of violence everywhere. Everyone is just at the edge. So it's going all wrong. It's going on the wrong path. However, can we adjust for it? Oh, yes, because as it seems like he has come to stay, so maybe Nigerians will have to start looking for alternatives to suiting their life into these policies.
Oluwatosin, let me come to you now, because I would like to follow up with alternatives that Ajibola mentioned. But before that, I also like to get your view. I don't know where your location at the moment, but on my way to the office this morning, I still saw long queues at the front of banks, entrance of banks, and people are really getting aggressive by the day. So I don't know what you've seen. I don't know how much of the new Naira notes you have. Over to you.
Thank you. Up till now, I'm still yet to personally interact with the new notes. They're very, very scarce. And to be frank, I've tried a few times to try and get some cash from the banks, but the queues, like you said, you see, are very long and very rowdy, actually. Like Jibola, I agree with Jibola in the sense that the idea behind the policy is a good one. I don't necessarily believe that in itself it would solve the problems that the CBN was trying to tackle. That mentioned that if the funds that are not in circulation are put back in the banking system, it should curb inflation. I don't necessarily agree with that, because in Nigeria, most of the factors that affect inflation and the rate of rises in prices of goods and services is from the cost side, not the demand side. Prices go up in Nigeria not because people have purchasing power and then there's a lot of cash, flow the streets. It's actually because prices go up when things like this affect the price of fuel, which almost every single business has a direct impact on their business. For example, if you're producing a good, you have to use the road system to distribute it. If it's a service, you have to power your office. So diesel or petrol, you need that. If you're importing something, the price of the rates, the exchange rate, directly affects your business. So those are the things that affect prices majorly in Nigeria. So the policy in itself, while looks good on paper, it's on its own, it's not going to solve the problem that the CBN has done. And what we are seeing in the streets of Nigeria is the fact that the implementation, the logistics behind the implementation of the policy has also been found lacking. We have changed currency notes before, but we didn't have this kind of reaction, to it, because the central bank, when it did it, that's when they changed the currency notes for 5, 10, 20, and 50 Naira notes. They did it over a long period of time. They did it in over stages. They launched it in some states and then expanded it into other states. But now we're running a race against time, with the policy just being hit almost immediately. I think it was announced in December and we're in February, and that's it. So the common man is the person who is bearing the brunt of these decisions. And as we see a lot of disparity in even regular businesses. You're trying to buy food and then you hear things like, we don't accept transfer, it's only cash. Things like that are not really telling a good story of what this policy is.
Great stuff. I must thank you. Now, Ajibola, let me come back so we continue this discussion. And I'd like you to sit back a bit so we have a little bit of headroom and we have a beautiful picture of you on television. But yes, but my question to you, I want to take it up from where you stopped. You talked about alternative channels. This morning, I bought chips from a lady I regularly buy chips from, and I was to pay 2,000 Naira, and I told her, please send me your account number. This is true story. And a few minutes before I came on air, I was about to send 2,000 to her. She said, please, add the charges. So I had to send 2,500 to her. So I'm paying 2,500 instead of paying 2,000 if I had cash.
Yeah.
Now that brings me, so you see, it's a 2-in-1 question. That brings me into how do you think our banks were really ready to implement this? Do we have that capacity?
No,
do we
I
have
don't
that structure?
No.
Take it away.
Okay. So I think that's a very interesting story, and trust me, we see that everywhere. It's been really, really out of it. The kind of interactions we see with people as regards this. So when I talked about alternative, I have not said that those alternatives are ready yet. I was just saying, like, we should start preparing ourselves for the alternative. Right. I mentioned before that was the implementation right, and I completely think it wasn't. And these are part of the implementation policies that I expected to be in place. First of all, if you are going to be changing from a cash society to a cashless society, the first question should be the alternatives. Are they ready yet? Are they up to date? Are there the stress tests? Have the bank stress test their system to accommodate 200 million Nigerians? Have they checked to see what are the flaws or what are the goods that comes from that thing? It was obvious that all this was not done. It is obvious that even the CBN did not even envisage the kind of reaction they are seeing now. I don't want to say they did not see the extent of how it would affect the economy negatively. Maybe they did not do so much scenario analysis to see the different options they have. But I would assume they did, but maybe they were not as extensive as they should have been. Because truth be told, the alternative channels are not up to it yet. I don't think the banks are ready. I don't think the banks could even forecast the number of, if they were attending to 10 customers before, now because of less policy, they have to increase from 10 to 50. That's like 5x. If I'm going to have 5x number of people more on my platform, if my platform is not ready for that, it would definitely not work. Like what you identified earlier this one, it happens everywhere. In fact, there's a case, you are talking of a case where the person is actually to add charges. There are cases where the transaction will not even go through for days. Right? How do you refer back to that person and tell the person, okay, I'm sorry, I've not made payment because the transaction is not going through? another person might be understandable, but some person else might need his money to do something immediate and then he's not interested again. Cases where people go to hospitals now and the hospital attendants are saying they want transfers, they want cash, right? In as much as we are saying brace up for the alternative, we need help from all these financial banks and all, as the so-called alternative, the so-called producers of the alternative. We need help from them. They need to work. As it is, it seems as if everybody needs to work overnight to get everything going, right? We know of some large institutions that were out of place. They were out of nowhere for close to 1 month, right? So it's in as much as we know that these alternatives, to be told, these alternatives are not top notch yet. They are not reliable. They are not so reliable yet. But at this point, I don't think we have any choice than to look for how it's going to work for us. Because like the other person talked about yesterday, I can't remember his name. He said something about if you continue to destroy these properties, you know that they are our own properties. It is not, it is the Nigerians that own it. So at the end of the day, if they have to repair those properties, we are going to bear the branches. So we don't have to necessarily destroy them. The question is, as this policy comes to say, it looks like it has. So what do we need to do to adjust to it? Wow. How do we need to make life better? How do we need to adjust and blend ourselves into this new system and just make it work? I understand that it's a lot of challenges, but somehow we need to make it work. You and I need to make it work. And to be honest, to some extent, I feel some Nigerians are taking it so far. I think some people are being unreasonable with charges. I think some people are taking advantage of the so-called cash crunch to make extra money for themselves. Is that fine? Well, I would not say it's fine or wrong. However, we need to consider that this thing is really, really hurting others, and we need to look for ways to just adjust into it. That's what I would say.
Well, let me take that to Oluwatosin. Oluwatosin, the banks are really most affected here. Just like my guest, she mentioned that was Ibrahim Tajuddin, who's the Director of Research and Strategy at Chapel Hill, Denham. He was the one talking about that yesterday, that these assets are ours, and some will even say we'll pay for all of these damages if we don't take time. But to you, what impact do you think this really has on our banking system in its entirety? Because some say some might even be forced to move away from the traditional banking. We see all of these online bankings being the toast of the day in recent times.
I think the banks are in for a tough period because when there's unrest and agitation in the community, people would go to what they can see and exert that frustration on that. Is why we've seen cases where branches were destroyed and people were being attacked. The policy, like we started with, it's not a problem, it's the implementation of the policy. One of the things that I've noticed is really, really lacking is engagement with grassroots people, letting people understand what exactly this policy entails, the change, where they can go to and where they can't. I remember the last time I was in the banking hall, people at this time, the central bank had instructed banks to only load the new cash notes on the ATMs. So anyone who wants to get new cash has to go to the ATM, which means if you go into the hall, you're not going to get cash. When I was in the banking hall, there was chaos in the banking hall, and a lot of people were angry and frustrated that they are unable to get cash. It's not easy for one or two bank staffs to explain to a banking hall of 30, 40 irate customers that even if I have cash in my hand, I can give it to you over the counter because the central bank has said so, right? And central bank did it via a memo banks, but it's not like we, the regular people on the streets know it. So you're hearing things that people are frustrated and saying, oh, the bankers are holding cash, they have their own personal POS machines and things like that, because they don't even understand what the policy is, how the policy affects, and what it means. you get to the branch, you see a queue outside that extends so long down the street. You think, oh, if I go into the banking hall, maybe I'll get it, but you can't. So these things boils down to sensitization, which we're never going to be able to get it within 2 months or 3 months. Nigeria's banking versus unbanked population is still between 35 and 65%. Only 35% of the banking population, people who are able to and of the age to own bank accounts. That is a fundamental problem. We're never going to solve that in 2 to 3 months. Even for the what they call it, the cashless policy, for example, only about 5 or 6 cities, not even states, 5 or 6 cities in Nigeria really operate what is close to a cashless economy. So it's like putting the cart before the horse. We were not ready to rush into this change, and I don't think we've got to carry people along for them to even understand what it means and how we're going to do it. Because if the public knew the full details and we have engaged everybody and we have sensitized people, people won't go to the banking halls and then start shouting at banking staff and then start destroying property, right? So it's a bit too late at the moment because elections are just around the corner, and the regular people are still feeling the effects of the policy. So I don't think it's a good one for us.
Anyways, I'm going to ask Ajibola my next question. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if you have a law background, but we know that there's a Supreme Court injunction with regards to this development. Because when we say this policy has come to stay, fine, but we still need to obey whatever comes from the court. And it's saying that we should maintain status quo at least for some time. But the president is saying 200 naira will circulate one way or the other. Well, I don't know if you have anything to say that has to do with law and the law aspect of it. But what do you think this also means for investors that want to come into our stock market with this kind of threat at the moment to our banking system?
Oh, sorry, that question's for me, right?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like you said, we are not lawyers. We are just economists.
Yeah, of course.
Well, at the moment, at the moment, yes, and the Supreme Court said A, CBN and the government and the president said B. They are at both sides of a different side of the desk, and they are fighting whatever it is they want to fight. However, what has been effected, what has been implemented into the citizen is the fact that the members of public are allowed to only accept 100 naira, 200 naira. Every other note is out of place. So there's nothing we can do to that, right? Because whatever it is the Supreme Court has said, has passed, right? They are the law. It should hold ground. But unfortunately, it is not holding ground, right? And like, to be honest, it's a bad signal for us. It shows that we are not in sync as a country. And no investor wants to look at that kind of country and is comfortable in that. What then that means is that if I come in as a foreign investor and I have this thing, and how do I know that whatever your word is your bond? How do I hold you to your word? Right? It is wrong that we disregard the law. I mean, law is law. I expect that there's a reason why there's a Supreme Court. There's a reason why it's court in the first place. And if every country always overrides their courts, then if there's no, they say where there's no law, there's no sin. So if there is no law, there's no sin. But as long as there is law and you can break the law, then it becomes a sin. So from the way it looks like the law is being broken. But who are we to say? If I had to talk from a foreign investor's perspective, I would think that it is clearly a bad signal for them. It is clearly something I don't think they will be comfortable with. It is clearly something they would mark down because they are good at putting up all these tests to make analysis, to analyze the market. And yes, it is something that they should fight for if they have to come into the country. But the truth is that that's not the only thing they look at, right? They look at a bigger picture. They have a bigger picture. They look at the resources you have. They look at all other things that they can bite on to help themselves. So that's just like one out of a lot of things that they look at. So I would not say on the overall scale of things is a negative or a positive. However, on its own part, that contributes to how they reform or how they analyze the market. Oh yes, definitely, that's a negative thing for us.
Oluwatosin, you touched on inflation. That's part of what the central bank is trying to tame with all of these moves. And we saw a deceleration in December, but of course, it's jumped up again in the month of January. And looking at this cash crunch, energy prices, PMS queues, and all of that, what sort of figures are we going to be expecting moving forward? Talking about inflation, with all of these efforts still being made by the Apex Bank.
Thank you. I think the jump in January is indicative of a small portion of the effect of these policies and other things that you had mentioned, right? Fiscal scarcity and all of that on prices. Inflation is lagging. So, I mean, we're in February, we're discussing January inflation figures. So by the time we're in March, we'll see a clearer picture of how this thing is really affecting prices locally. The fact of the matter remains that none of this is positive to our economic growth. It's not positive to living in Nigeria. It's not positive to attracting investment, like Jibola had mentioned, right? And when we begin to see these things affect things like our growth figures, by the time GDP comes out later in the year, we will see the effect of these things. I don't have a very positive view, right, on the economic importance or the economic benefits of these policies. I've had a few conversations with a few friends where they believe that in the long run we'll be better off, right? And this is just short-term squeezes, and we need to bear it and then wait to see like the longer effects of this. My counter argument to that is the implementation is lacking, and so I don't see where we're going to get the long benefits from, even if we're not even doing it properly or doing it right from the get-go. Also, this is not new. India did this in 2016. They touted the same things. They were tackling corruption. They wanted to tackle inflation. You know, they were even a bit more brash because the announcement was just overnight, and then they had a short window as well for people to bring in the old cash and whatnot. It had the very visible impact on the regular Indian man on the street. And so if you now want to look and say, okay, what was the long-term benefit? India has gone to being a larger cash economy than even a cashless economy, which was the target in the first place, right? So a country that has done what we are doing did not reap the benefits. You know, it would have made sense for us to learn from their mistakes, right? And then even if we want to go ahead and do the same thing, we would have been able to implement it, you know, much better. I don't think inflation is going to tame anytime soon. All of these things are going to negatively affect you know, prices, and we're still going to see those prices rise. So that's my answer to the question on inflation.
All right, Ajibola, you want to speak around inflation?
Yes.
Something around that?
Oh yeah, that's like my colleague said. So I'm actually agree with him 100%. It's something we've discussed, you know, on our own desk, and we've talked about from time to time, and asked ourselves, this policy in itself, does it really tackle everything that has been identified? Even though we hear maybe on the long run, he has said it effectively. The implementation, when you want to get something to work, you start by doing it right in the first place. Once you miss the step of doing it, then at the end of the day, it becomes a failed project. It's like a project that was handled that the CBN came up with and then was handed out to the public. However, if you want an effective project, you need to implement your project right. Once you fail in doing that, the chances of you getting what your project needs to, as in addressing what your project needs to address, might be likely determined on how you get it done. So at the long run, the unfortunate part is that the get-go of this policy has been failed. We failed the public as a whole, and it is. I don't want to say. I don't know how to go around whether it is too late or not. Maybe there are ways they can think about how to start fixing the problem now. However, I actually agree with him. The chances of it fixing the inflation problem in the long run, I doubt it also. I don't think it's something. I think it's a project at the moment with the way it has been implemented.
Honestly, and I would also follow up with that. That's still with you, Ajibola. Many say maybe the Apex Bank needs to also worry themselves with other things other than staying so much around this Naira redesign thing. Something that the CBN has even gone away from their regular mandate. Do you think there is more the CBN can do to sustain this economy as we wrap up this interview?
Yes, definitely. I mean, if you look at the factors around inflation, that's like 1 out of 1,000 things, right? We still have the problem of forex. We still have the problem of our net import export and the rest of things. How about we fix all that? We know we have fiscal policy, we have monetary policy. Yes, and yes, the CBN is only concerned with monetary policies, but there are other factors that would affect inflation in terms of monetary policy. Our major problem here in Nigeria, what is affecting our inflation is the cost push inflation. It is not demand. A lot of people don't even have this money at hand to buy stuff. So it is not the fact that people have too much money on their hands to buy items. It is the fact that the prices of goods rising per day, which is properly triggered by the cost of production, the cost of getting laborers, the cost of buying land, the cost of putting electricity in your homes. So all these things are what affecting our own inflation. So we need to start from the roots. We need to start by dealing with inflation from what is the main focus, which is not necessarily the cash in the circulation. It is far way more than that. So the CBN, really need to deal with it, but the angle that they are coming from is, I would not say it's 100% wrong, but it's just like you have a larger house and you're just picking the pencil from a larger stack of, or you're picking a needle, from a larger stack of needles. That's what I see it as.
I tell you, Oluwatosin, finally now, monetary and fiscal policy, they should be in sync. Many think that there's been a little bit of disconnect with regards to Nigeria, but what is your take talking about monetary policy, trying to leverage on maybe the fiscal side to achieve, for me, inclusive growth?
So I think more collaboration is required in formulation of policies. We have a very segmented, I think, I can't remember the term that was used, but we have what we call too many regulators, right? So the central bank on one side regulates the banks and FX activity, then insurance companies have their regulators, pension companies have their regulators, asset management have their regulators, the SEC is there, right? All these institutions need to work together to be able to come up with policies that can then generally positively benefit, the Nigerian economy as a whole. We have bigger fish to fry, like Jibola. Even in trying to tackle inflation, the things that we can maybe spend more time focusing on is policies that can help direct lending to the economy. Because if the banking sector is not lending to the real sector, then monetary policy cannot then affect the real sector. Because if the central bank increases monetary policy rates, for example, and banks are not doing loans where those rates then affect, the rates on the loans, then the monetary policy, if it goes up, it goes down. It doesn't really, monetary policy rate, if it goes up, it goes down. It doesn't really have an effect on the economy. So there are other things that, the central bank can collaborate with the Ministry of Finance, for example, and other regulators to bring about, a conducive environment. I'm a proponent of competition. Bring about a conducive environment for businesses locally and internationally to come and compete in the Nigerian environment. And then you can now start seeing the benefits from increased economic activity. Competition should bring down prices. Competition should maybe you can then see even the things that we're trying to do around maybe the cashless economy, for example, right? The banks on their own are not going to solve it. Neither is the central bank from Abuja going to solve it. It has to be what the regulators can do is to create the environment that allows individual businesses to thrive, right? And then we can then begin to see the benefits of that economic activity.
All right, before I let you go, if you were to give a word of advice, let me say an advice to the Apex Bank, what would you be saying? And Ajibola, I expect that from you too. We'll wrap up on that note. So I start with you, Oluwatosin. What's your advice with what is on ground at the moment to CBN?
Okay, I think it's to take a step back, right, and look at the drawing board again, see where we have visibly failed with the implementation, and see how we can make it do a 2.0, a version 2.0, but this time with better engagement with the people that are involved, right, the stakeholders, so that you can see how other institutions can assist to do things like this. For example, now we are trying to grow a cashless economy, but out of states, people that live in states out of aside Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, right? They experience it's a different country entirely. So if you don't have policies and solutions that serve that of the economy of Nigerians, then we're not going to really see that nationwide benefits, right, for rolling out this policy. The policy in itself, I think, is a small part of what should be a bigger plan towards financial inclusion, promoting a cashless economy, promoting lending to the real sector from the financial sector. So if the plan is to get all this cash into the banking system, then policies that would allow or that would give banks incentives to push that money out in form of credit to the real sector. Those are the kind of things that we can see that should be put in place, right? That will now together come come together and then give us that positive effects that we're looking for. But this policy on its own, it's not going to really have that much effect.
Interesting. Ajibola, what a parting shot from you.
Okay. So my own parting, I will just be focusing on its policy in itself, on the policy itself, which is, the major talks right now. As far as I'm concerned, I think they need to go back to the grassroots. If we want to really move from a cash society to a cashless society, the first step is to close the gap between the banked and the unbanked. As long as there's a high level of bank and unbanked, that space will continue. This crunch will continue to be there. And first thing I discussed with someone, we're just having a conversation was, NIN, if you remember the time of NIN, when NIN came, it started off as you need to register your NIN, blah, blah, blah. The conversation went going. For a long time, a lot of people did not take it serious. And then there was radio jingle on how you need to start registering NIN on your mobile phones, else you'll be cut off. They were given time. However, now, if you don't have your NIN on your phone, a lot of people have been cut off. But the question is not now, did you give people enough time? There were ample enough of time for people to fix this problem. So nobody came out to come and start fighting that, why did you cut my line off? In fact, most people, you see them say, oh, I'm sorry, I did not register my line. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. Yes. It came slowly and then it became implemented such that it didn't come with a with a resistance. It was accepted because enough time was given for people to blend into it. So the first thing is to close that gap. That gap needs to be closed, and it can only be done by the commercial banks. So the commercial banks need to help close. They need to start by closing that gap, reducing it to the barest minimum. Preparing the banks themselves needs to prepare for the advent of this cashless policy. They need to prepare. They need to be ready for people to move to that line. Because if I advise a woman selling something on the roadside, for instance, to come open an account, right, and to put her money in the bank, and then the next minute she wants to transfer money and she's not able to, have I not failed her? Oh yes, I have failed her. Does she have comfort in the system? Oh no, she would not. She gets scared because in her head, what she thinks is that before she had a cash app and she always had access to it, why would she have a problem having access to this? In fact, as a matter of fact, it just came to me clearly now that I think this policy, if not well, will even cause more problem, because what would then happen is that once people are able to get their cash out, they would get scared of going back to the banks. They don't want to go back to the banks again. Is it not the same bank that it took me forever to get my cash out? No, I'm not going back there again. Do you understand? So that the member of the public needs to be addressed. We need to speak to people. You need to go back to the grassroots. He needs to speak in the language that they understand. He needs to talk. They need to be the policy needs to be translated appropriately and explained to the barest minimum, such that anybody that hears it understands it fully and can blend into it. That's my own take on this.
Well, interesting conversation there. I've been speaking to senior manager at ZCAP Partners, Ajibola Toby Osho, as well as the assistant vice president, that's AVP of ZCAP Partners, Mr. Oluwatosin Ayonfanu. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Nigeria. We really do appreciate this, and we'll keep a tab on you and have you join us subsequently to discuss other topics.
Thank you.